purchase contracts. There is the standard contract, which is a little bit different than the as-is contract, but we teach the as-is contract here because probably 95% of the agents are using the as-is contract. And there are advantages, and there might be some disadvantages. It depends on which side of the deal you're on, okay? Our broker, Murray Coleman, would love to use the standard contract. But again, most agents are using the as-is. So, let's get rolling. What you have on the screen here is a copy of an MLS broker synopsis with an active status. You see right up here, you see my cursor? Kind of hard to see, but right here in the top right-hand corner, it says status is active, okay? If it says pending, that means it's already got a contract, it's under contract with somebody. Now, sometimes you'll see right below that it says taking backup offers, but my opinion is I would call that listing agent and say, how strong does that offer look that you're dealing with now? Because I have some people interested, and I don't want to keep them hanging on this property. If that's a solid offer you have and you feel good about it going to closing, we're going to look for something else, okay? So you want to make sure when you find a property for your buyers that it's got an active status. Things I highlighted in yellow here are, number one, the list price, okay? When you start working with a buyer, you should see a pre-approval from a lender, a pre-approval letter. If they don't have a pre-approval letter, maybe they're paying cash for the property. So you'd want to see what we call a proof of funds. That could be like a bank statement that says they have enough money in that account to pay cash for the property, okay? What year was it built? In this case, this said 1994. That means, that tells me as the agent right away that there's no other addendums or disclosures that are going to be needed, because if it was built prior to 1978, you would need a lead-based paint disclosure from the seller. If it was built between 2004 and 2007, the seller should give you a defective drywall disclosure, okay? But we're not in those years. All right, and there may be some other things. If it's a newer build home, you might have a CDD that the seller would need to give you, which is a community development district, because there's going to be some fees associated with that that actually are going to be rolled over into your real estate taxes, but they got it when they bought the house new. So just a couple things like that. So 1994, that's a good year. Special sale. This says none. Okay, that tells me it's not a short sale and it's not a bank-owned property. So none is good, right? All right. Let's go down here again. Important things, the legal description. You need to know that legal description. The property ID number. That would be right here. Under sewer, you'd want to look and see, is there a septic tank on the property? Because some buyers don't want to have a septic tank on the property, okay? They're just a thing. They want public sewer or city water and sewer. Septic tanks, I've got a septic tank in my front yard. It's been there since 1992. Don't have a problem with it as long as you take care of it. About every 3 years, you want to have it pumped out. Okay? But some buyers get to the closing table thinking they were buying a property that was on city water and sewer. They get to the closing table and found out that there's a septic tank and they want to back out of the deal. So make sure you understand that right away. Down at the bottom, it's going to, community information tab, it's going to let you know if there's a homeowners association involved or a condominium association. So in this case, we have a community association. It says yes. Over to the right, it says the HOA fee is $287.50, and that's required. Now, how often is that required? Back
Every
over
6
to,
months?
back over to the left, it says semi-annually. That means every 6 months. The buyer will pay that to the homeowners association. Okay? If it was a condo, then down here where my cursor is, it would have the condo fee amount. This tells you who the listing agent is, and in this case, this happens to be a property of an agent that we have here in this office. What financing is available? Will the seller is stating that they will accept cash, conventional, an FHA, or a VA loan. Dual variable compensation, that's really not a big concern of yours, but it could be if it's a short sale, because instead of maybe getting 3% co-op commission, if it has to have third-party approval where the bank has to approve the final sale price, the bank may say we're cutting that down to 2%. Okay?
What the difference between FHA and VA loan?
I'm gonna tell you right now, you are not, and I am not, a mortgage person, a professional mortgage person. You want to ask those questions to one of our lender partners especially, and there's somebody here usually every day of the week. Okay, and they will have classes on that too. But we don't want to give that information to people. You refer them to the professionals. Okay? Otherwise, we get in trouble. Because the mortgage business especially could change on a weekly basis. Okay? So they're up to date, just like we should be up to date as agents. So right here we see single agent. Does anybody here know if they're a single agent?
Yes.
If you're a single agent, raise your hand. Wrong. Wrong.
We're transaction brokers?
You are a transaction broker. When you get your license in the state of Florida, you are automatically a transaction broker. Now, some offices from other brokerages will allow you to work as a single agent. Okay? You have different responsibilities as a single agent. In this office, you are a transaction broker. Unless our broker, Murray Coleman, would come up, tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, I have a transaction going on here with another agent in the office. I need you to work as a transaction or as a single agent on this transaction. Then you would be a single agent. But otherwise, you're a transaction broker, so your eyes should go all the way to the right where it says trans broker, and that is what the co-op commission is going to be.
It's
Pardon me?
It's 3%.
Not all the time. It's what it's being offered here on the MLS broker synopsis.
Yeah, what I'm trying to understand is 3% plus 3%, like single agent 3%, and trans broker is 3%, or is 3%?
It's only
3%. Okay.
Yeah, this is saying that the sellers are offering 3% to an agent working as a single agent, or in this case 1% to someone who has no brokerage relationship with the buyer, or 3% of the sale price to a transaction broker.
Okay.
So you're not a combination of any, but you're just one.
2%.
Yeah, in this case it would be 3% of the purchase price.
Okay.
Okay? Realtor remarks, you always want to look at the realtor remarks. In this case, it says tenants are currently in the home. Anytime I see tenants are currently in the home, that means I might not be able to get my buyers in to see it when my buyers are available, because the tenant won't allow us to come into the home for one reason or another. Okay? If you ever take a listing and there's tenants in the home, try to get something negotiated with those tenants where they will be pleasantly welcoming to have people come in and let them see the home. Because number one, tenants usually don't want to move. They want to continue to live there. They don't want to help you sell the home. Okay? But tenants can determine whether your buyers can get in to see the home at a specific time on a specific day. All right? So if vacant is the best, because you can go in there just about any time of the day. That's pretty much the highlights on the MLS broker synopsis. Do you have any other questions on that? Okay, then let's move on to the next thing, is the handout I have that says must have information prior to asking for office assistance with purchase contracts. Now the reason we say that is because you're going through this class today, you're gonna know how to fill out an as-is purchase offer. Okay? If you come to any other agent in the office and say, hey, I got a buyer, can you fill out this contract for me? That agent's gonna look at you and say, sure, if you wanna split the commission with me. But after you have this class today, you're gonna have a template that you can go by, that you can take a blank contract and just fill in your buyer's names, fill in the property address, fill in how much they're going to offer, and as you go through it, you'll understand it a little bit more. But you fill it out. Now, you fill it out to the best of your ability, and then if you want to ask an agent in the office, can you just look this over for me to make sure I didn't miss anything? Just about any agent in this office will be glad to do that for you, free of charge. Okay? That's why it's important you know how to fill out this contract yourself. All right, so let's go with this here. On the offer to purchase, the buyer must have a pre-approval letter or a proof of funds statement that is less than 30 days old. Okay, do you understand why it has to be less than 30 days old?
Because it can be able to change.
It can be changed, yes. Okay. The buyer can be pre-approved and then they go out to Rooms to Go and they have their big sale and buy $15,000 worth of furniture that they don't have to pay for 5 years, but that affects your credit rating, which could affect your proof of your pre-approval letter. Okay? So less than 30 days old. I always try to stress this, make sure your buyer has physically seen the property and they're motivated to buy. Instead of somebody picking up the phone and saying, hey, I'd like you to put an offer together on this home. Have you seen that home yet? Because you didn't show it to them. No, I haven't, that's all right, I'll see it during the inspections, and if I don't like it, I'll cancel the contract. Okay, you're wasting your time. Make sure they've seen the home and they're motivated to buy. Have the correct spelling of all parties' names and contact information, okay? Buyers and sellers, you'll need the seller's information too, and that's easily found through the information that the listing agent provides. Now, if it's what we call an entity is a business name. And a good example of that is Orlando Rehab Homes LLC. It doesn't have a person's name, it's got a business name. If there is an LLC, an incorporated, a PA, a company, a trust, an incorporated, an estate, so on and so forth, you're going to need from whichever party it is, either the seller or your buyer, you're going to need a legal document that states who is authorized to sign legal documents on behalf of that entity. Okay, and I'll show you some examples later of that. But it has to be somebody's name. They cannot sign an offer or a listing with the name of the entity. It has to be an authorized person. We good on that? Okay. Know the following. Of course, the listing agent and the brokerage, that will be on the MLS. Buyer agent and the brokerage, hopefully that's you. The buyer's lender and loan officer, because you want to start a conversation with them immediately to find out if indeed these people have talked to them, have gotten an authentic pre-approval or pre-qualification letter, okay, how solid they are, if they're going to have enough money to come up with the balance to close at the closing table. who the escrow agent is. Now, the escrow agent is either a title company or an attorney's office. They're gonna close the transaction, okay? It's not the name of the person that answers the phone at that title company or attorney's office. It is the name of the title company or attorney's office. That's what should be on the contract. Good on that page? Okay? Know the property address. Make sure when you put it on a contract that you double check it so that you didn't invert any of the numbers, so you're actually offering to purchase a property down the street. Okay? That happens. The parcel tax ID, I showed you where you could find that on the MLS broker synopsis, along with the legal description. You will need both of those. You'll want to know if there's any homeowners association fees, any condominium fees if it's a condo. And sometimes with a condominium, you can have both. You'll have a condominium association and you'll have a master association that works hand in hand with the condominium association. That we would call the master association, but that would be, I don't want to confuse you, but that's a homeowners association rider B, whereas the condominium association is a rider A. These are all things you'll learn as we go. Or if there's any CDD fees, those community district development fees, if there are any in play. Also find out the association or property management contact information. Property taxes, how are we gonna know what the property taxes are on that property for 2023? Where do we look?
In the MLS?
It'll be on the MLS, but it won't say 2023, it'll say 2022. For the simple reason that the property taxes on any property for 2023 do not come out until November 1st of 2023. So you'll be looking at November 1st of 2022. So don't let that confuse you. It's always based on last year's taxes, okay? You'll need to know what your buyer's loan type is. If it's an FHA or a VA or a conventional, it could be something else. Okay, again, there's all kinds of things out there. The length of the loan, is it 15 years, is it 20 years, is it 30 years?
If the buyer wanna buy cash, like pay cash,
Then there's no lender involved.
there's no lender involved.
No lender involved.
And then that contract, how you make it straight to the seller?
We'll cover that when we get into the contract.
Okay.
There's two boxes. One is gonna be for a cash purchase, one is gonna be for a mortgage. Okay. But if it's your buyer has a pre-approval letter and you're gonna get a mortgage on the property, you need to know what the loan amount is because it's gotta be enough to cover the purchase of the home. The length of the loan, how many years it's gonna be, what the initial interest rate is. Okay, because you know how interest rates are fluctuating now quite a bit. The estimated closing costs, okay, your buyer needs to know what the estimated closing costs are gonna be because they have to come up with that money for closing. The lender every lender has a program where they just plug in a couple numbers and boom, it spits out the estimated closing cost for the buyer. But they need to know that. And so educate them on talking to the lender about getting that. Because if they don't have enough money in the bank to bring to the closing table, which the majority of them will need that, they're not gonna be able to buy the home. Okay? Also, it may be that the lender's gonna tell you, well, they don't have enough money for the closing costs. So they're gonna have to, on the offer, they're gonna have to ask the buyer to contribute, or ask the seller to contribute towards the buyer's closing costs. Okay? Good to go? All right, let's get into the meat of it then. As is residential contract for sale and purchase. You all have access to .loop and command, right? Okay, because that's very important, because that's where all the most updated contract documents are going to be for anything. Okay, if you're pulling it from other sources, they may not be the most updated ones. Every once in a while, I see that come through compliance, where it's an old contract, or it's an old addendum, or something. It's not the most updated. We have to send that back and have them get the most updated.
What is it called in command?
DocuSign?
Oh, DocuSign.
DocuSign is different than command.
I thought you said dot loop.
Did I say .loop? Okay, that's because we used to use .loop. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
so what is it?
DocuSign.
Oh,
DocuSign.
okay, okay. Got it.
But if you hear something wrong, always bring it to my attention.
I didn't know it was wrong.
No, that's good though, because I've been involved in so many different systems over the years. Okay, so on the left-hand column, you'll see there are numbers. Okay, behind some of those numbers is a little asterisk. That's that little star-looking thing. What that means is that's a blank that should be filled in. Okay, so you can kind of go by that. That's a general rule of thumb, because as we go through this, you're gonna see that there are some blanks that you will not fill in. But general rule of thumb, if there's an asterisk following a number, it's a blank to be filled in. So let's start out right away on number 1. We want the parties, and you see line 1 is for the seller's name. So if it's James A. Smith in this case, and you can write down whatever seller you want for a name, then that's all that needs to be there. If his wife or significant other is on title, then their name will need to be on here also as the seller. What I put in here behind that is if it's an entity, remember that's a business name. Let's say House 1 LLC. It should say House 1 LLC, comma, James A. Smith as manager or as owner or as agent, whatever the legal document that they provide you with states his position is within that business. Okay, line 2 is, of course, is going to be your buyer's names. In this case, we have, you're going to want to ask them their legal names as they want it to appear on the title. So in this case, Richard Jones just goes by Richard Jones. He might have a middle initial, but he's not using it. And then his wife, Lily, is Lily P. Jones. So that's the legal name she wants on title. Our next asterisk is going to be on line 7 under property description. So that will be the property address. Include city, state, and zip. Line 8. This property happens to be located in Orange County. Okay, so if you have if you're making an offer on a property in another county like Lake County, Osceola, Polk County, then make sure you put the right county on that line. And
We
then-
can go to the county also to find the tax ID.
Yes, you can, but it should be on the MLS broker synopsis. It should be posted right there. Doesn't hurt to go in to the county that the
Let's say-
property's located in and double check that listing agent put in the right
Let's say
number.
I need to post it to the MLS. It's gonna be in the county clerk code.
You could find it on a county property appraiser or the county tax department. Same thing with the legal description. It should be on the MLS, but if you have any question or you want to double check it, check, county appraiser or tax. Now, another good resource is IMAP. Have you heard of IMAP? It's capital I, capital M, capital A, capital P, capital P. That's always a good source to check.
When you say what here, the real property, the legal description, is it's something about the area, or it's because I don't understand the PH3 section 12.
We're,
I'm gonna see.
you're on line 9.
Line 9.
Line 9, okay. This happens to be the legal description for this property. Bay Hill, phase, PH is phase 3, section 12, but that's the way it's listed on all the tax records in an IMAP.
Okay.
Okay.
Is included.
That's the specific place that that property sits on. Some are longer than that, especially if it's an older home. You might have a longer legal description. Okay, we're moving on then to the next asterisk is line 21. And we have to back up to D here where it's talking about, in that paragraph above, personal property. Unless excluded in paragraph 1E or by other means of this contract, the following items which are owned by the seller and existing on the property as the date, the initial offer, these items are included in the purchase. So it goes on to list ranges, ovens, refrigerators, dishwashers, disposal, ceiling fans, light fixtures, drapery rods, end draperies, blinds, window treatments, smoke detectors, garage door openers, thermostats, doorbells. Television wall mounts is something that was added in November of 2021. That wasn't in the other contract. There was always disputes on if there's a big screen TV hanging on the wall, that should stay because it's attached. This is saying the wall mount will stay, the TV can go. Okay? Unless you specifically ask for the TV to stay on your offer. And television mounting hardware. Security gate and other access devices, mailbox keys, and storm shutters, storm protection items, and hardware. That's called personal property. So on line 21, there's an asterisk, and it says, other personal property items included in this purchase are anything that the buyer sees at the property that they would like to ask for to remain as part of the transaction, they would need to list here. Okay? I just put none because I'm not gonna put ideas in your head. Personal property is included in the purchase, has no contributory value, and shall be left for the buyer. The following items are excluded from the purchase.
So if you wanted to take your refrigerator with you, you would
If
write
this-
refrigerator.
Well, if it's excluded, if the sellers were taking a refrigerator, it should be noted in the MLS that the refrigerator does not convey.
Sure.
So on here, you would say the following items are excluded from the purchase would be refrigerator.
Okay.
I would be a little more specific and say kitchen refrigerator,
Sure.
because there could be a refrigerator
In the garage, yeah.
And sometimes, if it says refrigerator conveys in the MLS, they might take the one in the kitchen and take the old one in the garage and put it in the kitchen.
Mhm.
Now you have a refrigerator. So you can be as specific as you want, and sometimes that's good. Back when I started, we used to take pictures of the serial numbers inside the door, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, any questions to that point, because we're gonna get into the meat of it here with dollars. Yes, ma'am?
This contract is for a seller, and doing the same process for the, if I have a client who's selling,
I'm having a hard time hearing you.
okay, this contract is for a buyer, right?
For a buyer,
But in case I have a seller. is
that's
the
another
same process?
contract.
That's a purchase.
That's on Monday.
That's a
Yeah.
listing agreement. That's on Monday I had that class. Okay? You got somebody who wants to sell their home? Well, good, good.
I do have a question.
Yes,
So E is me checking the MLS to see what items do not convey, and I write them down. And D is what the buyer
wants to ask for.
wants to ask
Okay,
for.
because if you notice, on line 15 in D under personal property, do you see washer and dryer in that paragraph? No. Okay, so if your buyers walked in and they saw that there was a brand new, Samsung washer and dryer sitting there with all the bells and whistles on it, and they wanted to ask for that to stay as part of the transaction, they would have to write it in there. Okay?
Got it.
But that's not a normal, considered appliance that would convey with the property.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
D is the
that's-
wish list and E is don't even think about it.
That's a good way to put it, wish list, yes. Because when you make this offer now, the seller can always counter offer you that, no, we're not gonna leave that. The other thing here on 24, the following items are excluded from the purchase. I know sometimes there's like a patio set on the back of the nine that is not in very good shape, and there's a question as to whether the seller's gonna leave it or not, because it's not in very good shape. The buyers don't want it, so the buyers should put on their patio set on the back of the nine. So the sellers need to take that with them. Okay. Now, if there's a swing set in the backyard and your buyers have children, and they say, well, that would be nice if that stayed, that would be on your wish list, right? So purchase price and closing. I tried to make this very simple, so you should use simple numbers too. The purchase price that the buyers are offering on this property is $200,000. That's what they're offering on the property, and anything on the wish list. There's an asterisk behind 28, and that says the initial deposit to be held in escrow in the amount of, it says in bold letters, checks subject to collection. What does that mean? If there's a check put in there, it has to clear the bank. Okay, you're gonna put a $5,000 escrow deposit in, it's not gonna be considered that the buyer made that escrow deposit until the check clears the bank. That's why the majority of the time it's best to get wiring instructions from the closing agent, and your buyers can just wire the funds from their bank right in to the closing agent's account, and then boom, it's done. You should get your confirmation that the escrow deposit was made. So on line 30, we have an asterisk, and it says check one. There's a box for accompanies the offer. That very rarely happens. It used to happen a lot if it was a bank-owned property, a foreclosed property, where when you make the offer, they would want to see a copy of a check that the buyer had written out, and then that's all you got to do. You can tear up the check after you make the copy, but you're sending it in with the offer. But that very rarely happens. Number two, the box, I checked the box because that escrow deposit is going to be made within, normally it's going to be 3 days. If left blank, then 3 days, that's the default, but we don't leave blanks. We teach you here not to leave blanks because we don't want another agent or another person on the other side of the deal filling in the blank for you. And then when you get the offer back, you don't notice it, but there's been an addition. Okay, so we fill in the blanks. Yes?
So certain contracts only allow you to write in black ink. Can blue ink be used to fill out this contract?
Honestly, black ink is legal color in Florida, but I've seen all different colors.
Oh, wow.
As long as nobody complains, but it's always best to use the legal color, which is black. See, in Wisconsin, where I used to live, blue was the legal color.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know why, but, yeah, try to use black. Don't use red.
Wasn't a thought.
If it's something like that, it's gonna be because there's some document in code. If you use a different color of pen, the document can be illegal. It's gonna be like that.
Well, it could be, that's why black is the legal color, but like I'm saying, I'm seeing documents come in and
With the blue ink.
there's different color ink, but you're always best to stay on the legal side, so use black ink. Okay. Now, getting back to the escrow deposit. To be made within 3 days after the effective date. I want you to notice, it doesn't say 3 business days. Okay? 3 business days would mean if you got the accepted offer on Friday, that the escrow deposit wouldn't be due until when? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It doesn't say business days. It says 3 days. Those are calendar days. So if you had an accepted offer on Friday, which is fully executed accepted offer, that is day 0. Friday would be day 0. Saturday is day 1. Sunday is day 2. Monday is day 3. Okay? So I'm just throwing this out there. Late afternoon on Friday. Title company is already closed by the time you get this back, because it's after 5 o'clock. Could be close to midnight. Okay? So you're not gonna get the wire instructions, the buyers aren't gonna get the wire instructions until Monday morning at the earliest. Okay, so they have to run to the bank. A lot of banks don't wire funds afternoon, after 12 o'clock. So what I'm saying is, think about this. If you're making an offer towards the end of the week, and let's say, instead of 3 days, I might put in 5 days, giving myself a couple extra days for the buyers to get that done and get it done on time. Okay. Now, if it's beginning of the week, you shouldn't have any problem with 3 days. Okay?
Mr. Ball, you allowed to put more day? I thought that was 3 days. It's 3 days.
No, that's why it's blank. It's blank, you put in a number of days. Now, if it is blank, it's understood that it defaults to 3 days. Okay. But we don't leave blanks here, remember that. We don't leave blanks here. Okay. So you can put in 5. You can put in 7 if you wanted to, but you gotta realize that when you make that offer, it's up to the sellers whether they're gonna accept your offer. They may question, why do you have 5 days there? You as the agent can simply explain, well, listen, because we got a Saturday and Sunday in there, which are dead days. But they count, but they're dead days, nothing's open. Okay? 33, escrow agent name. Here's what I alluded to earlier. You're not gonna put the name of the person that answers the phone at that escrow agent's office. You're gonna put the name of the escrow agent. In this case, we have a business relationship with a title company called Florida Advantage Title. Okay. So we would encourage you all, if you have a listing, right? Because the seller's gonna choose the closing agent. Okay. But if you have an opportunity to use Florida Advantage Title, that would be great, because we have an affiliated business partnership or agreement with Florida Title, and they support us in the office. Sometimes a lunch and learn, sometimes towards a Christmas party or some other function. So how do we pay them back? We send business their way, right? Okay. Now you're gonna need their address. In this case, all that information would be on Florida Advantage Title's pamphlets out here. And you'll need a phone number. And on line 35, they're asking for an email. So in this case, who would we put down for an email address? It would be A. Woodhall at MMG Law, because that's Adam Woodhall. He's our representative for
They are in this
Florida Dentist
building?
Title. Pardon me?
They are in this big building?
They actually have an office right there, this side of the fire extinguisher.
Okay.
We got that? Everybody caught up writing? Now remember, normally the selling or the lister or the sellers are going to choose where they want that escrow deposit held. It is a negotiable item. You can negotiate with them if you want. Line 36, additional deposit to be delivered to the escrow agent within, I have put NA, not applicable because my buyers decided they did not want to put down an additional deposit. I heard Ronnie talking about additional deposits the other day. Did you all hear him talk about that? It makes your offer look stronger if you do use it, but honestly, not many buyers want to do that. Okay. So do I need to talk about the additional deposit? Does everybody understand how that works?
No.
No? Okay. Let's say you want to make your offer look really strong. If the home is new on the market, or maybe there's already other offers on it and are calling for, submit your best, highest, and final by such and such a date, noon tomorrow. You could put on your offer here that your buyers are willing to put in another $5,000 in addition to the initial $5,000 you're putting down in escrow. They would put in another $5,000. You would put it on that line, but I want you to realize that it says additional deposit to be delivered to escrow agent within. You would now put, instead of an NA, you would put a number of days. Okay? If you look behind where I have the NA, it says if left blank, then 10. Why do you think it would be 10 days instead of the 3 days? Because normally, you're gonna have your home inspection or any other inspection, termite inspection, whatever, all your inspections done within, I would say normally 7 to 10 days on a contract. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. So if you have the inspection done, let's say within 7 days, and everything is good, and your buyers are saying, okay, yeah, let's move forward, we can put down the extra $5,000 additional escrow deposit, and it'll be within 10 days. Okay. It just makes your offer look stronger, and if buyers really want that property and really want to come through with a strong offer, an additional deposit is a good idea.
And that particular time also you can put it up like 15 days?
In here,
Yeah.
whatever number you want to put in there.
Okay.
Remember, it's a blank to be filled in.
Yeah.
Okay, but if it's blank, it's gonna say within 10 days, you're gonna have to put that money in if you're gonna do the additional deposit. Okay? You don't have to do that. It just makes your offer look stronger. Okay, so, there's no additional deposit here on line 37, 0.00. Don't leave it blank. 0.00. 39 says financing. How much of that $200,000 are the buyers financing? In this case, we're putting down $160,000. How do we get to that $160,000 amount? Because the lender said they need to have 20% down. The buyer needs 20% down. Right? So 20% of $200,000 is $40,000, which means the lender will finance the other 160. Okay. So that's $40,000 though that the buyers are going to have to come up with.
And then, okay.
Okay. Now, line 40 says other. I have not applicable in here, but there could be other things involved with with the purchase of the property. Could be down payment assistance. Okay? Now that's a few other steps that the buyer has to go through to get that down payment assistance, and they have to qualify with income and so on and so forth. And they have, last I knew, they had to take some kind of a class. It cost them $75, I think, to take the class, and then they get a certificate, and then they can go to the county and apply. And so it's a lot of extra work, but is very helpful for someone who is on the lower income side. Okay? But again, you want to talk to a lender about that. In this case, it's 0. Okay? And again, I'm trying to keep these numbers as simple as possible for us. So, line 42, actually let's start on 41. Balance to close, listen to this, the balance to close, not including the buyer's closing costs, prepaids, and prorations. By wire, not by a check, by wire, transfer, or other collected funds, see Standard S. So if the closing agent will accept another form of payment, it has to be okay with them. Okay, otherwise the wire is the way to go. And normally that's going to be wired in. The best bet is probably the day before closing. Because if you wait till the morning of the closing, something might happen and the money doesn't get in time for your closing. Then you're going to sit there and wait until it does come through. What happens if it doesn't come through that day? Your buyers aren't going to get the key to the home because the money's not there, it's not funded.
What about if the buyer wanna pay by card, by credit card? It's not acceptable?
If the closing agent is not acceptable to them, then it's not gonna work. Okay? But these are things the buyer needs to find out well in advance of going to closing. So now do we understand the math here? How we get to what they need to bring to the closing table?
35,000?
35,000.
Because they already have 5,000 and
Well, let's go to the top.
yeah, 5,000 initial.
They're offering $200,000 for the property.
Mm-hmm.
They're putting 5,000 into the initial escrow deposit.
Escrow, yeah,
They're financing 160,000,
yes,
which leaves them a balance to close
35.
35,000.
But that 35 is not include closing costs.
Right.
It's down payment.
The closing cost, the prepaids, and the prorations are over and above that. So they gotta have more than $35,000 in the bank. Okay. Now I want you to all do this. We all agree that 35,000 is the number.
Yeah,
Okay. Plus the closing cost. But I want you always to double check yourself, because I see mistakes all the time. Start at the bottom. $35,000 is what they need to bring to closing. Add the 160 they're financing, that's 195,000. Add the 5,000 they already put into the escrow deposit, that totals the $200,000 purchase price. Okay. What I'm gonna ask you to really consider is when they're talking here about the, on line 39, financing, express as a dollar amount, which we did, or a percentage. When you put a percentage in there instead of a dollar amount, now everybody's gotta pull out their calculators, right? And mistakes are made when you use percentages. So use the dollar amounts, it's so much easier to do the math, okay? We good on that one? Line 45 is talking about time for acceptance of the offer. So, if not signed by the buyer and seller and an executed copy delivered to all parties on or before, I have a date of June 13th. Okay, because I'm making this offer on June 10th. So I wanna hear back from the seller by June 13th. If it's not a yes, we'll accept your offer, maybe it's a counter offer. But at least we're hearing something by June 13th. This offer shall be deemed withdrawn, and the deposit, if any, shall be returned to the buyer. Okay? So if there's no response to this offer by the time the date, not the time, but the date I put in here, then this offer is null and void. So you'd have to make another offer, new contract. Now, at the bottom of the page, it says buyer initials, so we're gonna have the buyer's initial there. On the right side, if the sellers accept your offer, they will put their initial or initials on the right-hand side. Okay? That's a good start, because that means they like your offer. The top of page 2, line 53, this contract, the closing shall occur on, I gave you a good 30 days. I went over 30 days. Okay?
Technically, on the 30 days, we can done a deal.
You should be. It depends on the lender and how fast the buyer has gotten the lender information. Because remember, if the lender doesn't have all the information from the buyer, it slows them up in the process of loan approval. And without loan approval, you're not gonna close on the date, on the closing date. But what I wanna point out is always make sure you have a calendar date on that line. Don't be like some of these agents and put 45 days after executed date. Don't put on or before 7/18/2023, because our broker says don't use on or before, because it leaves gray area. And we don't want gray areas. We want to know we're closing on that date.
But that date, you can ask the buyer when you want to do the closing.
Oh yeah, this is the buyer's offer, so you're not determining the closing date. The buyer's telling you, I'd like to close on this date.
Okay.
It's all gonna depend on if they have loan approval by that date. Okay, now if they're paying cash, they can close much sooner than that. 10, 14 days, they can close. You gotta give the title company attorney's office enough time to make sure there are no liens on the property, no what we call clouds. Nothing is owed to anybody by the sellers. Okay, they have clear title. So if there's a cloud on the title, it means it's not clear. And that has to be cleared up. So that's why you can't close in 2 days, because it doesn't give the closing agent enough time to run the checks that they need to find out if there is anything hanging over. Okay? Good? All right.
So that's
Line 83, this is important, assignability. It says check 1. The first one says buyer. Now remember, you're working with the buyer. The buyer in the first box says may assign and thereby be released from any further liability under this contract. A lot of investors will try to have you do that. Why would they do that? Probably because they got a good deal on the property, and they want to turn around and sell it to somebody else for more money than what they paid for it before the closing happens. Okay?
before even the closing.
Yes.
Is possible?
And they're not held responsible for anything with the original contract. I don't like that. I would always tell my seller not to accept that. Okay? I want the people who made the offer to be responsible for anything that happens before closing. Not for the buyer to assign it to somebody else and walk away and not have any worries, but they just made a bunch of money on it. So I would say don't ever check that box. The second box says, may assign but not be released from liability under this contract. Now, if an investor wanted to assign it, I would say, okay, a seller would probably be more acceptable to that because you still have responsibility here as the buyer than they would the first box. Okay. But the ideal thing for you and the seller is the third box that I have checked that says may not assign this contract. Why would I say may not assign this contract? Because I sat with the buyer, I went through all this rigmarole, we made the offer, maybe there was a counter offer or two involved in there. We're set for closing now. I don't want this deal to fall apart for some reason. So once you close on the property, it's yours, you can turn around and sell it to anybody you want. Assign it to somebody else at that point. Right? Yes?
So the two boxes before the third one, right, is giving permission to walk away before closing?
Yes. Yep, and I don't like that. As a seller, if I'm representing a seller, I'm gonna talk to them about that and say, do you really wanna let that happen? So, the majority of the time, I'm gonna see the third box check, may not assign. Financing is very complicated. So, Gilbert, line 88, there's a box there. This is a cash transaction with no financing contingency.
You check that box.
If it's a cash deal.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, your buyers can still go out and try to get a mortgage. Okay. But this contract is saying they're paying cash, so if they get denied that mortgage, they're still expected to pay cash. There's no financing contingency here at all.
He can get his contract, he can get his money
From somewhere.
for somewhere and then come in and buy it cash.
Yes, that's what they would have to do.
And in that case, I don't need any lender,
No, there's no lender involved. Because there's no financing contingency, so no lender would be involved. Now, the buyer can go on their own and try to get that cash somehow. But this says they're paying cash, so they gotta come up with the cash. They can't cancel the contract because they didn't get a mortgage. Okay? Which means they would, if they can't come up with the cash, they're gonna lose their escrow deposit more than likely. And they could possibly face a lawsuit from the sellers for non-performance of the contract. Could, I'm not saying they will, they could. Okay? So, line 89B, this contract is contingent upon within so many days, you're gonna put something in there. But the default is if left blank, then 30 days after the effective date, loan approval period. So you more than likely would put in 30. So your buyers have 30 days to get loan approval if they're getting a mortgage to purchase this property. It goes on line 90 to say buyer obtaining an approval of a conventional FHA, VA, or other type of mortgage. Mortgage loan for purchase of the property, and then it says check one. Is it a fixed interest rate? Is it an adjustable interest rate, which we're seeing again? Or is it a fixed or adjustable rate in the loan amount? See paragraph 2C. At an initial interest rate not to exceed. That's why, at the very beginning, I said, ask the lender, because you're becoming good buddies with that lender to see how the loan is progressing. Ask the lender what the initial interest rate is going to be so you can plug it in there. Why is that important? Because the way interest rates have been climbing, you could put the initial interest rate let's say was going to be 6.5%. If you left that blank, it would be what's called the prevailing rate. Prevailing rate, by the time your loan is approved, could jump to 7.25%. And if it did that, your buyers may not qualify to get a mortgage at that point. Right? So don't rely on the prevailing rate. Get an initial interest rate to protect your buyers. Because for some reason, if the initial interest rate is in there, and when they get ready to do loan approval, the lender comes through and says, well, we can no longer honor that, it's gonna be 7.25. Your buyers have an out on this contract. Okay? Is that muddy? It's muddy. Find out from the buyer's lender what the initial interest rate is gonna be and put it on that line. Then you're gonna be okay. Okay? You're protecting your buyers. Okay? Prevailing rate based upon the buyer's credit worthiness for a term of, it's blank, but are they getting a 30-year mortgage, then you plug in 30. If they're getting a 20-year mortgage, then 20. 40-year mortgage, then 40. Yes?
Just to go back for a moment,
Yes?
see if I understood. So we put 6% for the interest rate because we
Based on what their lender told you the initial interest rate would be.
the initial interest rate is whatever was the rate at the time they're ready to do this contract, right?
It's basically what the loan officer is telling you. They run their numbers. And what there is there's a lock-in. They will lock the buyers into that interest rate, initial interest rate. So it shouldn't go up. Now, if for some reason it goes past that lock-in date, then they would probably the buyers would have to pay an additional fee of how many hundreds of dollars, I don't know, to keep that rate. But basically, they're buying down the interest rate if it had risen.
It's
And it's a
going,
certain time frame, sorry, it's a certain time frame, right?
Time frame that they're locked in.
So they have that time frame to close.
Yeah, pretty much. And again, this is all lender stuff.
Right.
But the important part is you don't want the prevailing rate, which could be 7.25%, when they applied for the mortgage, the initial rate was 6.5%. But you didn't put that down, which means you chose the prevailing rate, which would be the higher rate.
It's like what's most relevant. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah. You want to protect your buyer to be at that lower rate.
It's good this was lower, but when you do it, it was often tomorrow is gonna be lower. That's what you can,
You think it's going to be lower than the initial interest rate? It could be.
Could be,
yeah.
It could be.
That's happening.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's something you have to discuss with their lender. You know, maybe the lender would bring it down if the rate was down at that time. If you're dealing with a good reputable lender, they might do that. If you're dealing with one of these internet lenders, who knows what they're gonna do, right? And you see them advertise all the time on TV, these commercials for,
Rocket mortgage and.
yeah, they make it sound really good. There's a number of them out there. So, always encourage them to deal with somebody that's local and licensed in the state of Florida, because some of these advertising may not be even licensed in the state of Florida. Okay? Does that ease your mind a little bit? No. All right. Line 97. Buyer shall make application for financing within. We want them to make once the offer is accepted and fully executed, we want your buyers to make every effort to apply for the mortgage as soon as possible. This is where, if left blank, then 5 days. So I wouldn't put any more than 5 days in there, but I would put 5 anyway, okay, or less. But your buyers need to get their stuff together. If they're serious about buying a home, they need to have all their stuff together, because the lender's already explained to them what they're gonna need, okay? Get that application done, right? Knock it off, because the sooner they get that done, the sooner the lender can turn it over to underwriting. And underwriting does a deep dive into creditworthiness. Underwriting is where mortgages can fall apart. Because the underwriters, in their deep dive, can find things that the buyer didn't disclose up front. Okay? After the effective date, and use good faith and diligent effort to obtain approval of a loan meeting the financing and appraisal terms. So appraisal terms, for a while there, a couple of years ago, well, within the last 2 years, there were multiple offers on a lot of properties. And to keep the offers as clean as possible, the buyers were waiving the appraisal. Guess what? The buyer has no right to waive the appraisal. The lender can waive the appraisal. The buyer doesn't have that right. So there were a lot of people that probably got burnt there. But if the lender says you got enough money down that we're not worried about the property appraising for the purchase price, they can clear. You can then put on the contract that the lender has waived the approval or
It's
appraisal.
not up to the buyer, it's up to the lender.
It's not up to the buyer. No, it's not.
Unless they're paying cash.
You have to pay in cash. Yeah. Then the only people that want to know if the house appraises are the buyers. Are they paying too much? And most cash buyers aren't worried about an appraisal. If they're going to buy it, they think they're getting a good deal to begin with. Okay. Initials at the bottom of page 2. Now we're trying to find the next asterisk, and that is on line 132 and 133. Now, what it's talking about here is an assumption of an existing mortgage involved. Most of the time, no. So guess what? Even though there's an asterisk there, this is one of those exceptions where we're not gonna check that box. We're gonna let that go. The second 133, purchase money note and mortgage to seller, that's seller financing. That's another word. The seller is going to finance the property for the buyer. That's another complicated deal. Okay? So the buyer is going, or the seller is actually going to draw up loan papers, just like a mortgage company would. Probably have it drawn up by an attorney. So much money down and so much time to pay off the mortgage and what the interest rate is gonna be.
That's when they pay it directly to the seller.
Yes, because it's seller financing. Now, there are additional forms needed with that. A rider C is one of them, which is all Greek to most of you at this point. But anytime there's seller financing involved, a conversation with our broker, Mary Coleman, should be on your books. Make sure you're doing everything correctly. So, if there's no seller financing involved, which in most cases it isn't, because if a seller has a mortgage themselves, that mortgage company is not gonna let the seller act or offer seller financing to another buyer. It's not gonna happen. Okay? And most people have mortgages.
Is the seller finance just another phrase for rent to buy? Or is that?
Rent
is
to
that-
buy, well,
Is that the same
that
process?
could be what's called lease option. Lease option purchase.
So it's like the seller
That's
will
another
release-
contract, yes.
The seller will release the home to this buyer once well, they're not renting, they own the home, but the
No,
mortgage is.
they're renting to begin with, and they can rent for so long, and sometimes a portion of that rent they're paying would go towards a down payment on the home.
So So that's different from the seller
Sometimes.
finance, cause they're actually owning the home, the
Yes.
mortgage.
Seller financing is they're buying the home from the seller is acting as the mortgage company.
Okay.
Lease purchase option, they're leasing the home from the seller for a certain period of time. And then they have to come up with their financing on their own. Okay, two different animals there. So asterisk, but you're not checking those boxes unless they apply. Closing costs, fees and charges. The first one is, for the seller. And we're dealing with the buyer, so we're not filling in any of that. Online, or on, section B, it's cost to be paid by the buyer. These are the normal and customary charges that a buyer would pay. On line 154, it says other. Our market center has a 254 market center commission. This is a good place to put that in. 254 KW market center commission for the buyer on line 154. Line 155 is talking about title, evidence, and insurance. And so, at least, I put in a 15 because what does it say for the default? If left blank, then 15. Okay? Title evidence. A title insurance commitment issued by a Florida licensed title insurer with legible copies, so on and so forth. The closing agent is gonna come up with that, and normally it's gonna be in plenty of time. But you want it at least 15 days. Okay? Bottom of the page, initials by everybody if it's fully executed. I don't know what I have here. Something like that. Next asterisk, 168. Check 1. Seller shall designate the closing agent and pay for the owner's policy and charges, and buyer shall pay the premium for buyer's lender's policy and charges for closing services related to the lender's policy, endorsements, and loan closing, which amounts shall be paid by buyer to closing agent or such other providers as buyer may select. Or, that's the one you normally would want to check for your buyer. Some buyers, a lot of investors, have a special deal with a title company that they work with quite often. So they get a reduced price on their title fees. So they may want to check line 172 here. Buyer shall designate the closing agent, and now they're going to pay the owner's title policy and charges instead of the seller. And again, the only reason they would want to do that is because they're getting a reduction in those charges from the title company they're doing a lot of business with. But normally, the seller's going to choose the closing agent. Okay? When we get to 174 here, we're talking about Miami-Dade, Broward Regional. We're not in that. We're not in those counties. So you would not check a box there, even though there's an asterisk. You're not gonna fill in anything in that paragraph. Line 179, you're not gonna fill anything in there, even though there's an asterisk. Okay, so going back to the beginning, where I said the general rule of thumb is if there's an asterisk behind a number, it's a blank to be filled in. These are the exceptions. Okay? 184, we're talking about a home warranty. Do we even know what a home warranty is? We're talking about a buyer's home warranty.
Whom,
Okay, we have enough people in here talking about it, but you guys might be too new to know that right now. If the property they're buying, let's say it has older appliances, and they can't afford to buy new appliances right now, because they're buying this new home. If it has older appliances, the buyer may ask the seller to furnish a 1-year warranty as part of the transaction. Okay? Now that 1-year home warranty, there's different coverages. A basic coverage is about $580 for a year. So you're asking what you're offering the seller, in this case $200,000 to purchase the home, but now you're asking for them to give you back $580 for a 1-year home warranty. Okay. It doesn't hurt to ask. Okay, they can counteroffer and say no. All right? But if you're gonna do that, you're gonna put at closing, there's a box in front of buyer, there's a box in front of seller. So if you're gonna ask the seller to furnish that for you, you check that box. I have put check the box in front of NA because my buyers said no, we're good to go. We're not gonna ask for anything. Okay? We intend to buy new appliances within a short time after we're in the home anyway. Special assessments. This part, if you're in a homeowners association, there may be special assessments. If the homeowners association does something to better the community, and they're going to put a special assessment on each homeowner in that community. That's a special assessment. Condominiums will have special assessments from time to time. Let's say they're gonna replace all the roofs on all the units in that community. So they're gonna break it up into the number of owners and the cost, and each owner is gonna share the cost equally for replacing the roof. That's a special assessment by the condominium association. This is not talking about those. So I'm gonna read it for you. Special assessments. At closing, seller shall pay the full amount of liens imposed by a public body, not an HOA, not a condominium association, public body. Public body does not include condominium or homeowners association, okay? So what could that be? It could be, maybe the county came along, or the town, or the city came along and put new sidewalks in front of your home. Instead of making you pay for the full cost of that sidewalk this year, they might divide it over 10 years, okay, or 20 years. Something along those lines. Okay? That's a special assessment they're talking about here. So your choices are, on 194, I have checked seller shall pay installments due prior to the closing, and the buyer shall pay installments due after the closing. Why would that be? Because the seller's living there, after they sell the property, they're not enjoying those improvements at all, so the buyer is enjoying them, so the buyer would pick up the payments after that. Okay? Sometimes I want you to check if you get an offer on one of your listings. And on 196, it's saying the seller shall pay in full prior to or at the time of closing any assessments allowed by the public body to be prepaid. So sometimes they can't be prepaid. But again, we're not gonna run into a whole lot of that, but just know it's not an HOA and it's not a condominium assessment. Okay, it's a public body. So always ask the listing agent, are there any special assessments against the property? It should be disclosed by the seller when they list the property, but they tend not to think about that stuff. Initials at the bottom of the page by all parties if it's fully accepted. On line 225, this is talking about flood zone elevation certificate. Most of the time, you don't need that, but still, I would plug in on 225, 20 days, because it says it left blank in 20. If something comes up at the last minute that you do need that, at least you got that 20 days to take care of it. 257, they're talking about property maintenance. So, except for ordinary wear and tear and casualty loss, seller shall maintain the property including, but not limited to, the lawn, the shrubbery, and pool in the condition existing as of the effective date of the contract. There was a time way back when people got an offer on a property, they quit taking care of the pool and it turned green, quit mowing the lawn and it got to be hip high. And they just didn't take care of anything because they didn't figure they had to. This language is saying that they need to take care of it, okay? So that's an important thing to remember. Here's the main reason that agents want to use the as-is contract. Property inspection and right to cancel, line 261. Property inspections and right to cancel. Buyer shall have, now there's a blank there that I put in 10, but the default is 15. If left blank, then 15 days after effective date is the inspection period. There should be no reason that this can't be done in 7 to 10 days. The longer it takes to have your inspections done and get the reports back, the longer it's taking you to close on the property. Okay. So, if buyer determines in buyer's sole discretion that the property is not acceptable to the buyer may terminate this contract by delivering written notice of such election to the seller prior to expiration of the inspection date. Not the day after the inspection period, before the inspection period ends, okay? And they would get their escrow deposit back when questions asked. If buyer timely terminates this contract, deposit paid shall be returned to the buyer, thereupon buyer and seller shall be released of all further obligations under the contract, and the seller can go ahead and relist the property as active on MLS. That's why. A buyer during this inspection period doesn't even have to have a home inspection. If they walk through the property and they see a scratch on the wall, which is not structural, said, nah, I don't want to take the time to repaint this, so let's cancel the contract. That's fine. With that standard contract, this is one of the big differences. With a standard contract, the buyer has to have a home inspection during that inspection period. And it has to be by a licensed home inspector. It can't be Uncle Joe or grandma or whatever. They have to have an inspection. Okay. Initials at the bottom. Initials at the bottom of that page. Now we're getting into good reading. Initials at the bottom of 7. Bottom of 8. Bottom of 9. We get to page 10. Line 508, number or letter L. Access to the property to conduct appraisals, inspections, and walkthrough. Okay? Seller shall, upon a reasonable notice, so reasonable notice means you can't just not show up on the door and say, I want to inspect the property. Reasonable notice, provide utilities, service, and access to the property for appraisals and inspections, including a walkthrough or follow-up walkthrough if necessary prior to closing. Okay? So the seller should have the utilities on really should. If they shut them off to try to save some money during the time it's listed, this is saying, with reasonable notice from the buyer, they need to have them turned back on again. Because you can't do inspections if the water's not running, the electricity's not on, so on and so forth. Besides that, it would get very hot in the house if it's in the summertime. Line 553 is talking about FERPTA tax withholding. Everybody understand that? FERPTA, that's foreign investors that own a property here and they want to sell it. Okay, the government of the United States wants to get whatever taxes that foreign investor owes them before they take all their money from the closing and go back to their home country. Because it states it here in the as is contract, when a listing agent sends you a FERPTA form to sign, have your buyer sign, you don't have to sign it because it says it right here. They're not informed that it says it here. That's why they sent the form over. I see it a lot from Charles Rottenberg, real estate agents, sometimes EXP, because there's really a lack of training. They don't need to sign it. It's the seller's responsibility to contact a tax person here in the United States and have that tax person walk them through whatever they need to go through to figure out how much taxes they would owe the U.S. government upon closing. Okay? Addenda and additional terms. These are addendums and disclosures that can be attached to the contract. In other words, we say a rider rides on the back of the contract. Okay. So we're making it part of the contract if we check one of these boxes. If the property is a condominium, you certainly would want to check rider A, condominium rider. You want that disclosure from the seller. If it's not a condominium, if it's most townhomes and single family homes, and then there's a homeowners association involved, you want to check rider B. Okay, making that part of the contract. Seller financing, that's that rider C, so this is listing all the stuff. Okay. Another one here that shows up a lot of time, rider P. Rider P is a lead-based paint disclosure. That's if the property was built before 1978. Okay, the seller should disclose that in anything they know about lead-based paint being in the home. Another one here, on the far right-hand column is rider AA. If you're working with a buyer or a seller someday, this is called personal interest in the property. If you are buying the property yourself, if you're related to the person that is buying the property and you're showing it to them in any way, shape, or form, you would need to use rider A disclosing that you are a licensed agent and you are acting as relative of buyer, let's say is an easy one. Wife of buyer, husband of buyer, nephew, niece. Okay? You're disclosing that you have that personal relationship. Okay? So don't forget that one.
You said that was AA?
AA. Yep. Any questions on that part?
Yes, the AA one is the only one. Can I ask this question? We give these documents because it's an attachment on MLS, right?
It's not an attachment on MLS.
Not the
You're making
homeowners.
it part of the contract.
So, but I
And
thought-
you are sending rider AA over if you have a personal interest in the property because you're related to to the buyer, or you are the buyer yourself, that's a personal interest in the property.
I understand the AA one, but for the homeowners association,
That should be disclosed by the seller.
and that would be an attachment on MLS?
It should be. It doesn't mean it's gonna be there, it should be. We teach all of our agents to put those attachments in MLS, and then in the realtor-only remarks, make note for the realtor to see it, the attachments to be made part of the transaction.
So when I wanna make an offer and it's not an attachment, I have to get that first from the seller agent?
The listing agent, you will ask them, where are they? Now, how will you know that there's a homeowners association or condominium association? It should be disclosed on MLS.
That means during the contract, you have to check which one is in that box.
Well, you're preparing the contract to send over to the seller now.
Okay.
So you're checking these boxes to make sure they're aware,
Is a condominium or is a,
well, no, that they're aware that they need to get you, for your buyers, these documents are gonna be part of the contract.
oh, okay, I got it.
This is before they've accepted it, they haven't
Oh, I
even seen it yet.
Okay.
So we're not sending these documents, we're
Well,
telling
again, perfect example, if there's a homeowners association and it states that on MLS, broker
Mhm.
synopsis, but in the attachments,
You don't
there
need
is
to
no
check
right or
here.
B, by you checking the box here on your offer to send over to them, you're reminding them that they have to disclose that,
Okay.
okay?
I guess what threw me off is said, additional terms are included in the attached addenda, so I thought we had to include this with the offer, but we don't.
No,
We-
you're making it part of the offer. If they accept
Yeah.
your offer, you need to see their disclosures from the seller.
They have to disclose it to you.
See, if you don't check that box, and there's a homeowners association, but you haven't checked this box, they're under no obligation other than they should. The seller should disclose the HOA, how much it is, what the name of it is, who the contact individual is. They should disclose that information to the buyer.
Okay.
If the box isn't checked, they're under no obligation to provide that to the buyer.
Okay.
Yeah?
Alright.
That
But
help?
what is meant by reserve? Reserve this means.
Reserve means that this addendum L is reserved, or I is reserved, K is reserved, L is reserved. That means those are addendums that you do not use with an as-is purchase contract. They can be used with the standard purchase offer, but they're not used with the as-is purchase. Okay? Keep in mind, the whole idea of the as-is purchase offer is the buyers are buying the property in its as-is condition. Okay? The seller is under no obligation to make any repairs to anything. But that doesn't stop the buyer from asking them to make repairs once the home inspection is looked over. Okay?
You're allowed to check all of them, or you?
Well, no, you really, there's no need to check. Only the ones that apply to the property. Okay, let me point out a common mistake by agents. Not just new agents, but experienced agents. And they can't seem to break the habit. Rider E, it says FHA VA financing. So what does that mean? That means you're disclosing to the seller that your buyers are getting either an FHA loan or a VA loan. That's a disclosure that the buyer needs to submit to the seller. Rider F is the appraisal contingency. The buyer is going to send that with the offer, saying if the property does not appraise for that $200,000 offer we made, then the buyer can cancel the contract and get their escrow deposit back. more than likely, the buyer's agent is gonna let the seller's agent know, the listing agent, that the appraisal came in $10,000 under the offer price. So are your sellers willing to sell the property for $10,000 less, because that's what it appraised for? It appraised for $190,000.
I remember Melia talking about negotiation. Is the part of the negotiation?
Yes, it can be if the appraisal comes in low. Here's what you don't want to do. No, go ahead, ask your question.
I was gonna ask someone, where is the mistake here? Or is that where you're getting to?
That's what I did. Rider E is for an FHA VA loan. It has an appraisal price on that form. Rider F is strictly for the appraisal, and normally it's a conventional loan or a cash buyer would use it. There's no reason to use both, because they both have appraisal contingencies on them for the purchase price. If it doesn't appraise for the purchase price, the buyer doesn't have to buy it. So E and F, you should only use one. If the buyer's getting an FHA or VA loan, you use Rider E. You won't need Rider F because there's already appraisal contingency built in there on Rider E. But agents continue to use both because they don't know the difference probably. Okay? So use one or the other. But only use Rider F if it's a conventional loan or a cash buyer. Okay? Anything else in there? Initials at the bottom. 591, additional terms. Here's where our broker Murray Coleman says we are not attorneys, so we should try to refrain from putting things in on this contract in additional terms, because this contract is put together by attorneys and the Florida Association of Realtors. Murray says anytime we put anything in there, we're practicing law, and we should not do that unless it's short, concise, and to the point. So, here's what we can do. If the buyer's lender says the buyer's going to need some assistance from the seller with their closing costs and able to make this deal work, you could put in sellers will contribute, and I just plug this number in, $3,000 towards the buyer's closing costs, prepaids, and escrows at closing, if that's what it takes to make the deal done, get the deal done.
Would that be something that you communicate with the listing agent prior to submitting the offer? Like, hey, we can only do this
You
if we
could.
get assistance, or
You could.
to kind of be like blind, you just submit the offer and that's included?
No, you could do that. But until it's on paper, a phone call doesn't hold much weight. If an agent calls me on my listing and says, hey, you're listed at 200, I have somebody that will offer you 210, will you accept that offer? Well, why wouldn't you? You tell them, put it in writing and send it over because you want to see it in writing. But as far as asking questions, yes, you can ask questions.
Gotcha. So like, how would this make it a stronger offer? I feel like
This makes it a weaker offer.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
It makes it weaker
because
on the
now,
buyer's
remember
side.
that 200,000 that you offered them?
Yeah.
You're asking for 3,000 of that back, or 5,000, whatever you put in there. So they're not getting the full 200,000. So they have to consider that. And then if you ask for a home warranty at $580 besides, that's $585 less than you from the offer you made of 200,000. So this is coming off your offer price,
Okay.
the seller's net. Just to point out, so you don't think I don't know what I'm talking about, online, 618 here is actually 619, but it says an asterisk following a line number in the margin indicates the line contains a blank to be completed. An again, I don't know why that's not the first thing on the first page of the contract, so everybody knows instead of on the last page.
What about the 610?
610. Seller counters buyer's offer. Okay. If you make this offer and the seller wants to counter, let's say they want $10,000 more from you for the purchase price, or they don't want to give the seller the home warranty, or the buyer the home warranty, they're crossing that out, or they don't want to give the $3,000 towards the buyer's closing costs, prepaids, and escrows, they're counter offering your offer. So they should check that box to notify you that they're counter offering. 90% of the agents don't know that box is even there, so good for you for looking at it and asking the question. So, seller counters buyer's offer. If they're gonna counter offer this offer, the seller should be checking that box and sending it back to you with whatever counter they're making to your original offer. Okay. And there is something called a one-page counter offer sheet. It is very simple, but a lot of agents don't know. They'll go back into here and they'll have their sellers do a strike through, let's say on the 200,000, they'll strike through that, put their initials, and then they send it back to you. Now your buyers have to initial next to that with the new price that was written in after the old price was struck through. So it makes a mess of the original contract with that one-page counteroffer sheet. You don't have to touch the original contract because the one page, if the buyers accept those changes to their offer, they sign it. And whatever counteroffer changes were made overrides this original contract. Okay. So on line 620, we're talking about a signature of the buyer. Along with the signature, we need a date that the offer's being made. 621 is for the second buyer, and a date. And then the sellers, if they accept their offer, would sign on 622 and 623 if they're accepting. Now, on 624 is talking about buyer's address for purpose of notice. You don't want the sellers or the listing agent contacting your buyers to talk to about anything. You're their representative, they should be talking to you. So, on that line, I'm putting, if they wanna say anything to my buyers, they're gonna contact Keller Classic Realty, 6900 Turkey Lake Road, Suite 1-3, Orlando, Florida, 32819. Attention, my name or your name. They're gonna contact you through the office. They have your phone number. But if a seller sees the buyer's information here, they can contact them directly, and you don't want that.
When you said we can use your name or
No, this is your contract.
Okay.
This is my contract. You're making your own contract.
Okay.
Yeah, it's always gonna be your name, not mine.
Okay.
Unless you're gonna let me have the commission. Then you can use my name.
That's good. That's a good answer.
That's a good answer, okay, thank you.
Funeral home realty?
Oh, you found that out. So, that's the next section. Line 634 is cooperating sales agent, if any, well, there is, and it's me or you or whoever's name you want to put on there. You're writing the contract, it should be your name. And the cooperating brokerage is Keller Classic Realty. Okay? So, the listing sales associate, his name is Paul Bearer. And the listing brokerage that he works for is Funeral Home Realty.
Oh, very good.
That's a good realtor. Funeral home.
It's a cold realtor.
Yeah, I don't like that.
No, you don't like that.
No.
I don't want him servicing me either. Okay? That's the contract now. So if you filled it out with red ink, you now have your template, and you can fill out a blank contract with your buyer's information just by referring to that if you have any questions. And again, if you're doing it for your first time and you wanna have somebody to look at it, just, did I miss anything? You can bring it to me or most any other agent that you know in this office, and they'll look it over for you.
Okay, but
Yes.
I